Oklahoma's back on the board with Josh Aisosa in the 2024 class. And of course, it's just about closing time for a couple of big names, Nwaneri, David Stone. We brought in the expert, Brian Smith, to tell us all about the recruiting scene on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in. It is Locked On Sooners. Josh Helmer here with you of KREF, the home of Sooner fans, and of course of Locked On Sooners, your team every single day. We've got Brian Smith, the resident recruiting expert, here with us on the Locked On Network. And today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel Sportsbook. Check them out, FanDuel.com/Locked On, where you can sign up. And this going to be, as you can imagine, very recruiting heavy in all of our college recruiting coverage, brought to us by LinkedIn Jobs. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/Locked On College. So Oklahoma back on the board in 2024. They get the commitment out of a local offensive lineman. Brian Smith is here with us. Brian, first off, thank you for joining us. Good afternoon to you. Josh Aisosa. What can you tell us about Josh Aisosa?
Power and athleticism. He's from Edmond. Plays Santa Fe, if I remember correctly, program that's had kids for years. And he's a kid that you think of that somebody like Edmond would want. He's a grinded out offensive line coach. This kid fits that profile to a T. Likes to mix it up inside, but he can get out in space and move too. I was surprised at how agile he was for a big kid. That's a really good player. And sometimes kids in Oklahoma get overlooked because there aren't a lot of guys like me that live in Oklahoma that scout kids, but he's a good ball player. And of course, Beddenball, I have complete confidence in figuring that out anyway. But it's nice to see a guy like that probably isn't getting the fanfare that he deserves, get a chance to go play for the Sooners because he's got a chance to start there someday.
So that brings the offensive line haul for now for Oklahoma up to 3. He joins Eugene Brooks. He joins Isaiah Autry. Aisosa with those two. What do you think of just what Bedenbow and Oklahoma have done in this offensive line class so far?
They have guys that can play different spots. I mean, Autry's a humongous human being, obviously, like the length and all that. You would think he would end up at tackle. But, I mean, again, that's why Beddenball gets paid a whole hell of a lot of money to figure that out. That's not for me. But he's also got kids that can – if you can play guys inside and out, just see how they work together and figure it out once they get on campus, you're going to benefit from just the chemistry aspect of it. And O-line is so much about that. He's going to figure that out. I like this kid, Aisosa, or however you pronounce his name. I think he can play tackle, but I'd rather have him at guard because he's so powerful. And he can kick out like they've run the guard trap thing. I know that coaching staffs changed, but when they were really rolling 4 or 5 years ago with the run game, you knew what was coming and you didn't stop it. That's how well they executed it. So I think this kid coming around the corner, not many outside backers are going to be very successful. I would do that and make him a pin and pull guy, and he can get out in the screen game too. We'll see what they do, but I think he's going to end up inside.
Speaking of offensive linemen, Oklahoma's trying to go across the pond.
Oh, that's right.
It seems like for an offensive lineman, Daniel Akinkumi, if I've got the pronunciation there, he set up the official visit, I believe, early September for Akinkumi. Do you know much about a prospect from across the pond? What should Oklahoma fans know here?
When I pulled up his huddle film and I saw NFL Europe, I went, oh boy, this is going to be a project. Then I watched him and I'm like, okay, somebody's worked with him that's been paid. Okay, like somebody that got paid to play. He's got some hand technique. He keeps his hands inside. He's grinds after the contact. He doesn't stop his feet. And he's a massive human being. There's a lot to work with. I think he's a higher upside kid than the one from Edmond. And tackle or guard, doesn't matter. He can play both. This is the evolution of the sport of American football. Let's be clear here. Since we're talking about Europe, you say football, that you might confuse them if you're talking to us, or maybe confuse ourselves. He's not a soccer kid. He's a mauler. but he's also got the feet to get outside and move around and do stretch plays. I was shocked at how athletic he was. So I don't know how you know about kids in Europe. I certainly didn't, because when I looked him up, I'm like, oh, okay. I had no idea. But that's football today, man. And it makes it fun, though, because there's no way I can grade him like I would some kid in South Florida that's going against elite players every week that are going to play Power 5 like D linemen. So it's going to be a bit of a transition, I'm sure, to play Power 5 football, because Oklahoma's in the SEC. Good luck with that, young man. It'll be quite a transition for you, but he still has all the talent you could want to play in the SEC level. So it's a cool story.
I should have told everybody off the top, too. Brian Smith, you can follow him on all of the social medias out there. I guess we're calling it X now, but on social media at FBScout_Florida. And Brian, of course, our recruiting expert here across the Locked On Network. So I'm always curious to get your thoughts when we talk offensive line, like an Aisosa, the other guys that are in this class, talking about somebody, I don't know how they find, a prospect across the pond, but sure enough, they've done just that. What are you looking for those guys? I mean, it feels like Oklahoma's done a nice job. Bedenbaugh's done a nice job. Of course, they'd like to get more blue chippers, but in the 3-star developmental types, they've found those kinds of guys and developed them into nice players. So when Oklahoma's going in, I guess, uncovering a talent from underneath the rocks a little bit, what do you see when you flip on a tape? I mean, what are you looking for with guards, with interior guys, with tackles? What are the traits you're looking for?
Interior usually don't have as long arms. At least that's the concept that most people believe. Some of them, though, are just so nasty and so powerful, leave them in the phone booth. And then the guys that can play both, they're just so athletic, it doesn't matter. That 6'6" kid that's 310 that can really bend at the knees, and he has the length to take on the pass rushers that are 250 and less. That's the rarest of the rare, and they make a lot of money. So it depends on the kind of scheme you're playing, though. Oklahoma's scheme, when they were running just full throttle up tempo, they still ran the ball too. They needed guys that could do everything. That's why I thought Venables was as good an O-line coach as it was with the last 10 years or so. I don't see how you can't constantly recruit really athletic guys. Don't forget the rankings. Oklahoma's still trying to play fast-paced offense quite a bit, especially with the kind of kids they're recruiting at slot and all that. You can see what's coming. They're going to need guys that can get out in space on screen game. They're going to need guys that can get out and pin and pull again. It's going to be, I don't know if it'll be quite as fast-paced as what some Sooner fans are used to from 5 years ago, but at the same time, athlete. They're not just big guys anymore. You're going to see more guys that were maybe projected at D-line early in their career that flipped over, etc. Guys that can play in space, that is the key. Guard or tackle, it doesn't matter.
Want to talk about the two big fish on the board. Not that they're the only prospects for Oklahoma out there, but folks want to know, okay, it's closing time with Williams, Nwaneri, and David Stone. We'll talk about those two and more in just a moment. First, let me tell you about our friends at Bird Dogs. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege for a free tumbler with every purchase. birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege, where Bird Dogs, they make you look good. That's Exhibit A, right? That's the most important part. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts designed to fit slimmer and give you that sculpted look. They do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better, which, hey, the nice fit's always important. Bird Dogs uses the anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long, which, Brian, I'm sure you can attest to out east, down in Florida and such. That's important detail.
It's rather warm down here right now. It's 113 heat index or something like that. It's not friendly right now.
Well, and that's why we need Bird Dogs. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege and enter the promo code LockedOnCollege for a free tech hat with your order. That's birddog.com/LockedOnCollege and get that free hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. That's our promise. Hey, there you go. There's the hat right there for you. They had the tumbler in the past. Now they've got the hat here for you. Okay, so the couple of big names for Oklahoma. Everybody wants to know. Nwaneri, okay, the 14th, we've got a commitment date. What should Oklahoma fans be expecting for Williams Nwaneri's commitment date, and should they be confident?
I'd never like to predict too much with five-star kids because they have so many options, but I mean, Oklahoma has always been the leader in the clubhouse, at least perceptionally. But this year has been so wild. Some of the most obvious commitments have went way, way off from where I thought they were going to go. So I'm going to pick Oklahoma, but I mean, the in-state schools made a big move. And the other factor is the two-time defending champion. Those are three really unique scenarios. I mean, I wouldn't put any money down on where he'd go, but I would still pick Oklahoma.
Well, and given that this is probably the final time we talk before this decision comes down, just a refresher for, folks that maybe are just dialing in or they've been following this, even start to finish, Williams Nwaneri. I mean, your impressions, what type of talent, who is Williams Nwaneri for, if it's Oklahoma, if it's Georgia, if it's Oregon, if it's Missouri, if it's Tennessee, what type of player is Williams Nwaneri?
Impact, edge guy that could play inside on 3rd and long. He has extremely good length. He has the ability to set the edge as a power player, but be twitchy enough to act more like a 250-pound edge rusher. He is the complete package. He is somebody that would probably start at Missouri, just as an example, as a true freshman pretty quickly, maybe even Oklahoma too. And it's not like Oklahoma is void of talent, but they need D-line players to begin with, and he'd even compete early at Georgia. I think that kind of puts it in perspective. They're not hurting for D-linemen, obviously. He's just a special talent. He's an NFL player in waiting, barring injury. And, I mean, his recruitment won't end when he commits. It's not like any of these schools would stop recruiting him. But, I mean, there's a reason that he's a consensus 5-star, top 10 player by all the services. He's a dude.
Well, from one 5-star to another, right? August 26th is the date for David Stone. Is there anything new to report with David Stone, and what are your thoughts on this recruitment?
His recruitment has been wild. Having interviewed him more times than I can remember, so I live fairly close to IMG. It's just hard for him to say no to people. He really enjoys the relationships. Oklahoma is home for him. Obviously, he's Del City or something close by. But he's tripped to Washington and Oregon and Michigan State and Tennessee and Miami, all these places. Anything's possible, but everything I've heard in the last month or two is Oklahoma. I'm going to see him on Friday, but hopefully he gets some clarity and figures it out and he's done for his own sake, because it's been a grind on him. But I think he's the best interior pass rusher in the country, and a kid that, again, like Nwaneri, would come in and play right away at Oklahoma and possibly even start. A very special player that's got an NFL future.
It's almost, from a recruiting standpoint, unfair to a player like Nigel Smith, just because Nwaneri, Stone, according to the recruiting rankings, are so high up the board that for Oklahoma fans, naturally that's going to be a lightning rod of attention, right? And yet Nigel Smith is another big name that's out there as a target for Oklahoma, and he's got his commitment date that was just set on September 8th. And Oklahoma fans, right? I mean, if like the scenario unfolds where you get 2 out of the 3 and you don't get either Nwaneri or Stone, but you get one of the 2 and you get Nigel Smith, to me, that's still a pretty good scenario to wind up in. So what do you know about Nigel Smith? Obviously the commitment date approaching there too.
He's a little bit like Nwaneri with his frame, maybe slightly bigger. I think he'll eventually he could play some strong side end, but he'll eventually be a 3 technique and play at 280, 285. And he's got the athleticism to do it and be effective in the pass game, which again is the end all be all. You have to be able to put pressure on the passer because everybody can throw the ball. It's going to be interesting to see what he ends up doing physically, because he could take his body a lot of different directions, but he's overlooked, like you said, because of the 2 guys we just talked about. In a lot of other years, this might be the kid that Oklahoma would sign, and it would be the best D lineman they get. He's a really good prospect. His offer list is ridiculous. But Nwaneri and Stone are, in my opinion, both top 10 players nationally. So it is what it is, but great player, and I'm hoping that we get some clarity on it. And again, like Stone, I hope he makes a decision and sticks with it. Following these kids that take visits after committing is very difficult.
Yes, it is. I can imagine. So I've got a little bit of a curveball for you. First, just let me tell you guys about FanDuel.com. Go on over FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up, where football season, come on, it's here. It's just about to get going and kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. That's because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on, well, spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. So and this is probably going to drive you nuts, right? You're like, well, this is not on the call sheet. This is not in the notes, but just a minor curveball for you. I know it's early in all of this, but first off, just your general reaction to college football realignment. What do you make of just the latest dominoes that have fallen? Is it too early for you to see any impact as a second part here? Is there any impact that you've been able to notice on the recruiting trail yet, or is it too soon?
The kids don't look at it quite the same way that you or I would. They're looking at relationships. That's what sells. I say that a lot. Kids don't pick what's on the shirt. The fans don't like hearing that. They pick the guy wearing the shirt. It's just true. That's why getting the right coaches is so important. But I think it's going to start taking shape more once we get into the season. And on every broadcast you listen to, it could be a bottom end game that's not even Power 5. They're going to be talking about Colorado going to the Big 12. They're going to be talking about the Big 10 being from New York to Los Angeles. All this over and over. And some of these kids are going to start thinking about, do I really want to play some kids will. It's going to change recruiting forever because every kid will be different. I mean, like the latest thing, and this is really weird to me. Stanford and Cal possibly going to the Atlantic Coast. Look, I'm just going to say this. It's not for me to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. That is ridiculous. Those two schools are completely out of their realm and their depth socially. You cannot get further away socially than the San Francisco area to the deep south, like where Clemson's at. I mean, that's a horrible idea. Horrible. What are we doing? So I'm curious to see what kids would think about that. Kids in California are the ones that are impacted the most. I don't cover that area except for when I go out to Elite 11. But like, if you're a California kid, and you don't want to go to LA to play one of those two schools. Like the two schools in Arizona are bolting. Utah is bolting. Colorado is bolting. You got Oregon State and Washington State, but what league is that going to be in if there is? So the recruiting in California is the one I'm most curious about, because you can be a school that never really did well out there, and you can come out there and say, well, none of the schools that you would think about normally going to anyway are really in that area anyhow. You might as well come over here. So it's going to change everything. It's just wild, man.
Because of the Cal Stanford news, and because I know that you're down there in Florida, I mean, what are you hearing? Not even on the recruiting trail. What is the buzz on the sports radio side from media types? And we know that Florida State's frustrated, right? I mean, they've got representatives, leadership that's been pretty outspoken about that. Where are Florida State and Miami in regards to, could they be at any point in the near future on the move? I know that grant of rights makes things difficult, but what's just sort of the general reading on the thermometer out there?
Well, Florida State is really unique. That is a program when I was growing up, they were kicking butt every year. They had top 5 class every year. They finished in the top 5 in the polls every year, and they were dominant. But then all the dominoes changed with all the money that went into facilities. Late 90s and early 2000s, the arms race really began. And for whatever reason, Florida State's boosters aren't the same as some of the other schools that really aspire to win titles. And I think the TV money, and I'm sure you've heard about going through like different capital and different, I'm sure you saw, I'm not even going to get into the name and all that. It just makes me very nervous. But these schools are looking for different ways to make money to compete with Georgia, to compete with Alabama, where their pockets are just endless. It's just insane. And kids love the shiny new object. They just do. They just do. Oklahoma's, are they in the midst of making their facility, or it's they got something going on? And it's like every 5 years it's outdated by standards. I don't know how some of these facilities are outdated. I go into them, I'm like, if this is outdated, please send me your leftovers. So I think that's a big part of it. But I mean, the people down here, Florida State people, were like, I don't know what to make of it. Because again, like Tallahassee is in what we call the redneck Riviera. It is in the panhandle of Florida. It does not fit socially in the Big Ten at all. Zero. I mean, none. So it's just about money. It's a pure money grab. It will not be good for the vast majority of the school, but they're looking for ways to get capital to build the football program. They can say whatever they want otherwise. That's the real reason.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. OU, by the way, is in the midst of some new renovation products that has gotten passed through. So I don't know that there's a definitive timeline on when all of that sort of stuff will be done, but yeah, they're doing some pretty hefty renovation work. 2025 in closing here, Oklahoma, it's like total departure from the way it really 23 and 24 seemingly played out, where it was late that summer, before the early December signing period. This is 1 year in front of those types of timelines, but Oklahoma's making some hay in the 2025 class already with Elijah Thomas, Kevin Sperry, Grayson Harris, and Kamari Moore committed. What's your just general reaction to Oklahoma, I guess, on a faster track than the previous two classes?
Yeah, that's a trend. There are several schools that are doing some of that and getting kids to commit early. I don't know if that's a good thing, especially with all the conference realignment we just discussed. Some of these kids might reconsider. Like, your parents are like, I'm never going to see you. And it's wild. But every conference has some games like that now. Parents are going to have to pick their poison on when and where they go to games if they're spending out of pocket. But anyway, Oklahoma's done their due diligence. Some of these are Texas kids. That kind of speaks to it. I mean, Oklahoma's roster has always had more Texas kids than any other state. That's not going to change. I think it's just doing part of their process. And they're kind of, believe it or not, if you've got like 4 kids committed, give or take, par for the course amongst the major programs. Oklahoma, obviously a blue blood amongst college football history. So I'm really interested though, like quarterback, that kind of stuff, quarterback, corner, D-line, that's where I pay more attention than anything else. So good for the Sooners there. Now the question is, again, can they win some of those big matchups against Texas, Alabama to fill out that class? But good start. So good for them.
Brian, appreciate you always for joining us. Everybody check out Brian's work at FB_Scout_Florida out there on the old social medias. And, of course, you can catch him all over the place on the Locked On Network. Brian, thanks, my friend, and we'll talk again, I guess, soon.
All right, buddy. Take care.
That's Brian Smith. I'm Josh Helmer for John Williams right here on Locked On Sooners. Until next time, everybody, Boomer Sooner out there.